having me here, and especially to Gethsemane Community Fellowship, Tidewater Home Funding for putting this together. It's really because I get to talk about something I enjoy and I have a platform for it. And I really much appreciate it. As Ali mentioned, I'm an law attorney. That's what I do all day, every day. I don't work in any other area of law. Most of my work is estate planning, asset protection planning, and of course, when folks die, we do a lot of estate work. And what I want to talk about this evening, TC mentioned something I kind of focused in on about being a good steward, very much a biblical principle, and just always a reminder we're stewards of what we have. Not everything we have, well, we don't really have anything. We're stewards of what the good Lord generously provides us with, and we're tasked with being good stewards of that. And part of that is just managing our life well, the resources we have, using them wisely. And I want to tie that in this evening to long-term care planning and estate planning. And most all of us, I think probably everyone here this evening, kind of look ahead a little bit, think about what you have, maybe what you want to do once you've passed on, your family, your loved ones, your church, even my own estate plan. I've got my church and my estate plan. I support my church, and I'm sure they'll miss me when I'm gone. I hope they will, but I also want to continue to support my church financially when I'm gone. But all that generally revolves around your estate planning. You say, well, how does long-term care planning or long-term care insurance, how does it tie into that? When I meet with folks about their estate planning, one of the things I want to see always is what kind of insurance that you have. Now, I'm not an insurance salesman per se, but insurance is one way that we protect our estates. Most of you listening, you have car insurance. Why do you have car insurance? Well, if you get in a wreck, cause a lot of damage. If you had to pay for it outright, you may cause $20,000, $30,000 worth of damage. You may not have that kind of money, and that could not necessarily bankrupt you, but put you in a tough spot. So you have insurance to cover that. Most of us, younger people at least, have life insurance. Why? Well, if you die, not if, but when, that life insurance can kind of replace your income, maybe help cover your debts or final expenses that you might have. Long-term care insurance goes right with that. It's a component of our estate planning, because you could have the best estate plan in the world, maybe provide for your family, your church, your loved ones. But if you find yourself getting old, have a stroke, maybe your mind deteriorates to the point that you need 24/7 care, it can kind of blow up your estate plan. Whatever you thought was going to happen with your estate, it may not work out because of the cost of long-term care. Most middle-class people, families cannot really afford extended long-term care. And I'm going to, a little bit later on, I'll go through on some advanced slides we have here. Ali, you can bump that ahead probably to the next one there. There we go. So we just want to mention that long-term care costs, they can really destroy your estate without planning for that. Whatever you thought you were going to do could just not going to work out. Middle-class folks, we'll go through the cost again later, generally cannot afford that for an extended period of time. But I also want us to see, I'm going to give you some numbers. The cost of long-term care is quantifiable. I'm going to differentiate the cost of long-term care, let's say, to a car wreck, right? You have a car wreck. I have two boys. They're 20, almost 21 and 22. And my younger boy, I've gotten a little use out of my car insurance. He's had a couple little fender benders. One of them was around $10,000, $12,000. Other was about $20,000. And when that wreck occurred, it could have been something 2 or 3,000, could be 30. I didn't know, and that's why I have my car insurance. But I'm going to talk about long-term care. Cost of that is not quite as variable as, say, a car wreck or a fire to your house. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide there, Ali. We'll look at some of the tools, estate planning tools that go hand in hand with long-term care planning. And this is huge. If we ever get to the point where we need 24/7 care, right? Think of the stroke, dementia of the Alzheimer's type. Some people just live long enough, you get to the point where you need somebody helping you all the time. But there's a couple tools in the toolbox we really need that goes along with estate planning. Really need a financial power of attorney. That seems so basic, but I have a number of older clients that have medical issues or cognitive impairments, and they cannot pay their bills. They cannot access their money, cannot pay the bills. So we need that financial power of attorney to do that. The second component, healthcare power of attorney, right? We got an older person in the hospital. They need some direction with how they want things to play out. And by the way, these are two separate instruments for financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. So that healthcare power of attorney is one that will direct the medical care that we'll be receiving when we get old. And the last one there I mentioned, there is a will or trust. And the reason why we want that in conjunction with long-term care planning occasionally, and I'm going to say occasionally, this happens a whole lot, I'm often recommending an asset transfer strategy in order to protect assets. So when I see that will or the trust, and that tells me right then and there, if we do an asset or if I recommend an asset transfer strategy, I want to know who the people are that should be receiving these assets. Again, this is while someone's alive, we're trying to protect assets. I want to see that will or the trust in place. So we need all this in place simply in conjunction with looking at long-term care, looking down the road at what we want to do at that time. But we want that financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, and of course, we want to have a solid estate plan in place. So let's look at now quantifying the cost of long-term care. That's on the next slide. Here we go. So in the Tidewater area, and I broke this down and understand these numbers I'm giving you, these are just general ranges. There'd be some that would be outside this range, but I'm going to tell you probably 75% of anywhere you look are going to fall in these ranges. And I broke it out first. Independent senior living, what does that cost? On the very, very low end, there's a number of senior apartments in this area, and that's considered independent living, $1,900 a month. Some of the nicer places, about $3,000 a month. Again, that's not assisted living. That's a senior person living in what amounts to an apartment for senior people, minimum care and supervision, $1,800 to $3,000 a month. When you look at assisted living, you're looking at about 3 to 6, and that 3 is on the real low end. I could name maybe, gosh, no more than 2 or 3 facilities in this entire area that are in that 3,000 range. I could name you a whole lot that are in the $6,000 a month range. What is assisted living? It's not a nursing home. It's not nursing care, but typically they're staffed 24/7 available. But the people in assisted living generally are expected to be ambulatory, meaning they're generally expected to be able to get from their room to the dining area and generally be expected to do things like bathing, dressing, feeding themselves with a minimal amount of care, hence assisted living, not full-time care. And then that bottom rung there, you see about $6,200 to $12,000 a month for nursing care. Those are not exaggerated numbers. And I'll even tell you where those numbers come from. That 6,200, there's one facility, I'm quite fond of it, in Franklin. It's called East Pavilion. It's a wonderful place. But because of the market there in Franklin, it's the cheapest in this area by a margin at about $6,200. Not a bad place either. People often think, oh, it's less expensive. It's not a good place. Now, East Pavilion in Franklin is a fine place. $12,000 a month. You say, where's that? Another fine place, Beth Shalom in Virginia Beach, $12,000 a month. People that don't believe that, I can't give you names, but I got bills to both of these places, and that's the general range. That's the low end and the high end in our area. The average is going to be about $7,500 a month. And the reason why I mention this isn't a car wreck that may cost you $150,000 or your house burns down and you're out $250,000. There's a real number that applies to long-term care. And when we're looking at insurance or how we're going to pay for that, this is something we can do with our calculator and a piece of paper, pencil, whatever there. It's not something overwhelming to quantify the cost. I just want us to see what this cost is when we're looking at what kind of strategy, what kind of insurance do we need in place. So we go to the next slide there. And here's what I want to mention: long-term care insurance. All right, long-term care insurance. there's a scads of policies in a couple of slides. We're going to go through kind of the variables that we look at in a long-term care policy, but it will pay for nursing home care, assisted living cost, and possibly in-home care. Now, there are some policies only pay for in-home care, maybe a limited benefit. There are some that may only pay for a nursing home, but a typical policy, long-term care insurance, would pay for all three of those, sometimes at a different rate, but a modern policy will cover all three of those costs. And that maximum daily payment is always fixed, meaning it doesn't matter if the facility you're in is $100 a day or if it's $400 a day. Whatever's in that policy is what it will cover, and they won't pay you whatever's in that policy. It's whatever your cost is subject to that cap amount. Meaning if you're in a facility that's, let's say you're at East Pavilion, and that facility is about 205, 210 a day at East Pavilion, and you have a long-term care insurance policy that pays $300 a day, they're not going to pay you $300 a day. They're going to pay you $205, which is what that facility costs. So when we're purchasing or evaluating long-term care insurance, they don't pay you what that stated amount is. That's the maximum, subject to evidence that you're incurring that cost. So let's go to the next slide. And what I want to just mention here, and you'll see a little bit of a bias I have here shortly, but the question is, okay, do we get long-term care insurance or not? All right, and it sounds simple. It is a very, very complicated analysis. It's quite doable, but here's a couple of things I want all of us to see. Those long-term care insurance rates have increased substantially in the last 10, 15 years, right? And I'm going to give you some real numbers from somebody that's in this on a when I say daily basis. This is what I do. Right? I have this one client. It's the coincidence. He's a lawyer. He's up in Northern Virginia. He's actually paying $25,000 a year in long-term care insurance premium. $25,000 a year. He's like, good golly, that's nuts. Well, it's about to double. He had called me for a consult on, hey, what are my options? You think that can't be true, Palmer? No, it is. Now he has an insurance policy today that's not even issued anymore. They don't even issue policies like that anymore. And that's an extreme high end. But let me give you one on the real low end, and then I'm going to tell you this is how we address the problem and how we decide what's best. On the real low end, what I consider a pretty lean policy, and I'm of the mindset if you're going to get long-term care insurance, I'll elaborate just a little bit, but we want to go a little bit on the leaner side of long-term care insurance. You're looking at a minimum, and by the way, long-term care insurance premiums are quoted in annual rates. You know, it's not $100 a month or whatever. It's by the year. And a very inexpensive policy would cost you about $3,000 a year. That's the going rate right now. So $3,000 a year up to 7 to 8 would be typical. There are some that are multiples of 7 to 8,000. By the way, that number quoted you, the 25 grand going to 50, that's for a married couple and a $500 a day benefit, unlimited. Can't even buy that today. That's a legacy policy that this lawyer still has. And I want to mention too, when we look at long-term care insurance, do we do it or we don't do it? Generally, insurance, not just long-term care insurance, but any type of insurance is generally more efficient for prospective catastrophic losses. All right. I've got this pen right here. You can, Mike, say, hold it up to my camera. Right? This is a pen. I don't know what this thing costs, 50 cents, $1. I don't have pen insurance, okay? Because I can afford to replace my pen. My staff steals them all day long. I don't care. They take my pens. It's a joke. I leave them laying around and I accuse my staff of stealing my pens, right? I don't insure my pens. I can afford to replace that. I can't afford to replace my house if it burns down. I don't have that kind of money laying around. So that catastrophic loss of my house, I will absolutely insure. I will pay somebody to insure that. Long-term care insurance is somewhere in the middle. It's a little more quantifiable. And because it's quantifiable, I find it to be I'm a little less inclined to say, hey, go out and buy long-term care insurance, because it's not like if you go to a nursing home, 2 months later, you're bankrupt. That's just not going to happen, generally speaking. your house burns down, you don't have insurance, you really could be bankrupt, inside of 2 months. And I want everyone to consider too the possibility of self-insuring. And it's like, well, there's no way I can self-insure. Oh, but you can. And I'll give you some little basic math to look at later, some general guidelines, but don't think you got to run out and buy long-term care insurance. If you do it, I'm not opposed to that. But you want to look at the cost, the benefit, and I'm going to tell you right where the sweet spot is if you're inclined to purchase long-term care insurance. Let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to give you some considerations here. Now we got a bundle of Ben Franklin's there at the bottom, right? So here are our considerations, right? These are good rules of thumb. Your premium should be no more than about 10% of your gross fixed income, right? So somebody that's got income of $50,000 a year, if you're paying more than 5, you are probably buying insurance that's a little bit beyond appropriate given your income, right? And you say, well, what about somebody making 20 or 30,000 a month? Those people could be self-insuring. What I see way too often makes me uncomfortable. People that have maybe $2,000 a month Social Security, 24 grand a year, and they're paying $5,000 a year in long-term care insurance. Right? That's you're buying insurance and you're paying a lot for that. You should look at alternatives. And here's this other little rule of thumb I have here, something I've just come up with myself, that if your fixed income, along with investment income, is sufficient to pay for long-term care without more than 4% annual shrinkage of your investment principal, you're a good candidate for self-insuring, right? Let me just give you just a few basic illustrations of that. You've got Social Security and pension income of $50,000 a year. You have investments that may produce another $20,000 a year. So let's just say $70,000 a year. And with that, we're not shrinking our principal at any significant rate. You have enough money right there to self-insure. Why do I want you to self-insure? It's for no other reason that long-term care insurance is very, very expensive. When I say expensive, I'm not looking at what you pay per month. I'm looking at what you pay versus what you get. It is very, very expensive. And I also want you to think of your house as a resource, all right? So if you get old, the wheels fall off, you have a stroke, you go into a nursing home, your house is a resource that should be considered as a means of paying for long-term care. I don't mean selling your house and spending all the money in a nursing home. That's not what I'm talking about. You sold your house for $300,000. Right now, the last time we did this wasn't true, but it's true today. You can get 4.5%, 5% on your money. So if that house is sold, there's a pool of money available to help pay for long-term care. You might be shrinking a little bit, but just I want you to think of that house as a tool. If you're not in the home, if you're like me, I like my home, I live there. If I weren't living in my home, I don't want to keep my house. It costs an arm and a leg just to pay the taxes and the insurance on it. But if you do want to purchase long-term care insurance, I'm going to tell you, purchase the minimum coverage to help you sleep well at night. And I'm going to tell you what that might look like. Let's look at the next slide. So you say, okay, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. My mom, my dad, my uncle went into a nursing home and they lost the house and the kitchen sink and the pickup truck and everything else. I don't want this to happen to me. So you say, okay, my long-term care insurance, here's what I want you to do. One, you do not purchase unlimited coverage. Why? Because you can't afford it. That's sure some rich fat cat making $300 a year. You can't afford that unlimited coverage. They don't even sell those policies anymore. All right. And there's a numbers that we can look at to say what is appropriate. And I'm throwing a number out here in that second bullet. Average stay is about 18 months. All right. You say, well, what's average? Well, I don't know what average is. Average is not going to be you. You're not going to be in there 18 months. You may be in a few months. You may be in a few years. You may never be there. But I use that average of about 18 months, and I suggest get 2 years worth of coverage, right? That's on the low end. You can sleep well at night, and a heck of a lot of things can happen in 2 years. The wheels fall off. You need 24/7 care. That 2 years of coverage at no more than what the average cost of care in our area is. And I'm going to say $250 a day is appropriate for 2 years. That to me is the sweet spot where it's fairly affordable without getting into the situation where you're paying a disproportionate amount of your income for long-term care insurance. Let's go to the next slide. And they put me on the clock. They told me that I only had 30 minutes to talk. If you tell a lawyer preacher, you got to give them how much time to talk, because they'll go on and on forever. And I thought this was going to 10 o'clock and I was excited, but I heard we've got to shut it down at 8 o'clock. So, but I'm going to try to stay on time. I'm going to try to wrap this up in about another 7 or 8 minutes. There's plenty of time for questions. All right, so here are the features. We're looking at long-term care insurance. That daily benefit is huge, all right? And the difference between a $200 a day benefit and a $500 a day benefit is more than double the premium. You don't need a $500 a day benefit unless you're going to go up to a facility in Washington, D.C. or Alexandria, someplace like that. Around here, you do not need a $400 or $500 a day benefit. I'm going to tell you $250 with an inflation benefit, right? $250. Why? You're not even going to tap your income, your Social Security, your pension income. $200 to $250. If you're really paranoid, maybe $300 a day. Right? The types of care reimbursed, you're going to pay more for a policy that provides an in-home care benefit. And that in-home care benefit is typically half of what the facility care rate would be. So if your policy is $300 a day benefit, your in-home care benefit might be half of that. So some of the policy features, your daily benefit, type of care reimbursed, whether it's a nursing home, assisted living, or in-home care, annual inflation protection. I value that feature because if you bought a policy 20 years ago, $150 a day would put you in Fat City. Today, it puts you on the wrong facility because you're not going to get anywhere around here at $150 a day if you need intensive care. So that annual inflation protection is great. Total dollar coverage, that's how these policies are denominated. You may get a policy with a $200 a day benefit, and it runs out 2 years, and that's just they'll give you an amount. It's $200 a day times 365 times 2 times 730. So it always gives you a dollar amount. This is how much coverage you have. And then the last one there, the elimination period. These are just key features. What that elimination period is how long do you have to be privately paying before that policy kicks in? And I would tell you, never try to get anything less than 90 days. 60 to 90 days is a good elimination period. If you have a zero elimination period, your rates go through the roof. If you have too long of an elimination period, say 120 days, that means you're going to be paying 4 months on your own. But a typical elimination period is 90 days, right? And that's, again, I'm talking about the sweet spots here to get a policy that's efficiently priced. So let's look at the next one. There's an alternative. All right, so you may say, hey, it's not affordable for me. If you said that, I certainly understand that. I'm of the mindset it's not bad stuff, but you gotta buy it right and get in that sweet spot, or you're gonna way overpay. So you may decide, hey, I don't want long-term care insurance, I can't afford it. You might decide that self-insuring, that's too risky, right? I'm not a gambler. I've never played a casino game. I've never bought a lottery ticket. I'm not gonna say I'm not a gambler, but I'm one of those people. I'm not going to roll the dice. So you may decide self-insuring is one of those rolls of the dice that could put you in the poorhouse. It's like, okay, but I'm going to tell you too, lastly, not everybody goes to a nursing home and goes broke, right? It's really a fairly small percentage of the people out there that happens to. They all find their way to my office because that's what I do. But we all hear these horror stories. You know, a lot of it is wives' tale. It's urban myths or legends. My neighbor, they lost their home and their car and everything. I've been doing this a long time, and all those times that's happened, I could count them on one or two hands out of probably 1,000 cases I've worked with. It does happen, but it's just not that common that people go broke. So if you you can't afford the long-term care insurance, and you're thinking, gosh, this is really going to put me in the poorhouse. I don't think I have the money to do it. Don't lose any sleep over this, because it's not terribly likely that you're going to end up broke because you don't have the ability to pay for long-term care. So let's look at the next slide here, Medicaid. All right. And I'm going to preface all this with, Medicaid is not something that we should rely on. All right. It's a government run program. There's elections every 2 years. These programs can change, and they do change. But presently, Medicaid may pay for long-term care if there's nothing else available. I got plenty of clients probably do 2-3 Medicaid applications a week for long-term care, right? So people don't have the insurance and they don't have the money to pay for it. Medicaid has very, very strict eligibility rules, but there are allowances to avoid complete impoverishment, right? Particularly for a married couple. Rarely do I have a married couple that's middle class. And let me define this for everybody. You got a house that's paid for in our area, anywhere from 200 to 300,000. I know I feel old. It's like, man, that's a lot of money. Seems like not long ago they were 80 to 150,000. Now they're 200 and up for a middle class home. But my average married couple, middle class, as evidenced by a home that's paid for, that's worth 300,000 and $200,000 in other assets. Under current law, we can get them on Medicaid without extraordinary gyration. But I'm going to tell you again, don't make this part of your plan, but understand that is available now. All right. So looking ahead, if you think I can't afford long-term care insurance, I don't feel like I have piles of money to pay for a nursing home, don't fret. Medicaid's out there. It's available. But I'm going to say just don't plan your whole life. I'll just go on Medicaid later on. It's not quite that simple. All right, so let's go to, I think it's our last slide here. So when we think about our estate planning, we got to have that will, power of attorney, medical directive. We may have loved ones. We don't really want them to get anything outright. We're worried because maybe they have limitations or whatever. So we want to have an estate plan, but we want to factor in long-term care, because whatever we think we're going to leave to our loved ones may be obviated. It may be nixed by long-term care costs. Long-term care insurance is an option, but it is not always the solution. And I will tell you, it's rarely the only solution. And by the way, I have a life and health license. I can sell long-term care insurance, but it's not always the solution. And the cost effectiveness should be carefully considered, right? We look at your income, we look at your assets. I also want to look at people's longevity. I got quite a few folks, the parents lived into their 90s. A lot of those people lived in their 90s. They were still driving. They were still doing other things. So what I'm always more concerned with is a family history of a cognitive impairment or a history of strokes. Those are the people that are at far greater risk, not just of needing nursing home care, but it's extensive nursing home care. My current record is a little over 20 years. Somebody was in a nursing home for over 20 years, right? But for every one of those, I've got 30 of them that didn't even make it a year, right? So just don't think this is something that's going to happen, wipe you out. But that long-term care insurance, not always the solution. We need to look at how effective, how efficient that is before we buy it. Do not dismiss the possibility of self-insuring. Everybody out there listening, like, holy cow, I don't have $7,000 a month to pay a nursing home. You don't think you do, but if that's where you are living, right, and you didn't have to pay for your home, it's for a lot of people, it's not quite out of the range of affordability as you might think. I think of my own house, what it takes care of just as to keep my house, my taxes, insurance, utility bill. If I weren't paying for that, that's money that ostensibly could be used to pay for my care. I want to tell you too, do not rely on Medicaid. Don't make this part of your plan, but it is a system, right? That I got a typo in there. It got past my editing mode, but it's a system that can currently pay for long-term care for some individuals, right? And this is this Medicaid system in Virginia. I'm going to throw some stats out at you. Of all the Medicaid costs in Virginia, about half of it goes to long-term care. But the people on long-term care Medicaid, basically people in a nursing home, they're only about 7-8% of the total, meaning it's a huge chunk of the budget. And that's why I tell people, don't make this part of your plan. The system changes, and it is a gnarly system. I had just in the last, I had probably 3 weeks, I've had 2 appeals. Sometimes I'll go 4 or 5 months without appeal, where somebody should be on Medicaid long-term care. They're denied for one reason or another. We can't get them approved, and we have to go on appeal. But anyway, that system is there. But generally, we have to have minimal assets, but there are a fair number of provisions and protections in place. But just again, I want to conclude with, have a good estate plan. Do not overlook the possibility of long-term care. That insurance is a possible tool. Don't run out and just buy it. If you do, you want to talk to somebody like me that can look at your total picture, what you have, how it's situated, what are your options, and then when you do buy it, I'm going to tell you, go on the real low end, because it's a very, very pricey proposition today. May be able to insure, self-insure, and sometimes we do a combination of both. I say buy you a real skinny long-term care policy, and let's look at your assets, and then sleep well at night.